When Elvis Presley passed away on August 16, 1977, it sent shockwaves across the world. The news broke like a thunderclap, reverberating far beyond Memphis, across America, and throughout the globe. For millions of fans, it felt as though time itself had stopped. The man who had redefined music, revolutionized pop culture, and captivated generations was gone. The king of rock and roll, the boy from Tupelo who had risen to become the most famous person on the planet, had left the stage forever. But in Memphis, at the very heart of his world, the final curtain was drawn in a way that seemed both unreal and deeply poignant. Graceland, his beloved home, had always been a place of mystery, luxury, and legend. Now it would become the solemn setting for a public spectacle of grief, as the gates were opened to a flood of mourners, famous faces, and curious onlookers. It was a surreal, almost dreamlike atmosphere, a scene unlike any other in American history. On the morning of August 18th, the day of Elvis's funeral, Graceland was already surrounded by a sea of flowers, many sent by fans who had traveled from all corners of the world to pay their respects. Fans, some weeping openly, some still unable to fully grasp the enormity of what had happened, gathered by the mansion's gates, silently honoring the memory of the man they had loved. Some had been Elvis's fans for decades, while others had only recently discovered his music, but all were united by a profound sense of loss, a feeling that Elvis's death had left a gaping hole, not just in the music world, but in their own lives as well. They had all been touched by his talent, his charisma, his humanity. The gates of Graceland, which had long been a symbol of Elvis's larger-than-life persona, now felt strangely open, almost inviting. But they weren't just opening to the public, they were opening to a moment in time that no one would ever forget. Inside the mansion, the air was thick with sadness and disbelief. Graceland had always been a place of joy, music, and exuberance, where Elvis had spent countless hours in his home studio, hosting friends and family, and entertaining his guests with impromptu jam sessions. It had been the stage for some of his most cherished memories, from quiet nights with his family to exuberant gatherings of his closest confidants. Now it had become the final resting place for a man whose life had been lived so loudly, so publicly, that it was almost impossible to imagine it coming to such a quiet, tragic end. As the day wore on, the sense of grief grew even heavier. The mourners, many of whom had been waiting for hours or even days outside Graceland, were given a chance to file past the mansion's front doors. The crowds had been told they could pay their respects in a public procession, and what followed was nothing short of overwhelming. A constant stream of people filed in, tears running down their faces as they stood silently in the grand foyer of Graceland. The house that had once been Elvis's private sanctuary was now a stage for mourning, where fans and celebrities alike paid their respects to the man they had all admired, in their own way, for different reasons. Inside the house, the mood was somber. Every room had been transformed into a shrine to the king. Photographs of Elvis from his early days as a humble country boy to his glamorous years as an international superstar were placed carefully around the room. Flower arrangements, many in the shape of guitars or musical notes, covered every available surface. The scent of roses and lilies filled the air, mixing with the lingering feeling of disbelief. It was as if Elvis himself had been frozen in time, forever young, forever the icon that the world had come to know and love. But now he was gone, and the reality of his absence had settled heavily on the shoulders of those who loved him most. Outside, a procession of mourners, some of them famous, many of them unknown, gathered in tight clusters, reflecting the weight of their shared grief. The mourners' faces were a mixture of emotions: shock, sadness, disbelief. The hum of the crowd's whispered conversations seemed muffled, as if the gravity of the moment had slowed the passage of time itself. The sense of collective mourning, a deep, palpable sorrow that connected each person to the other, was overwhelming. Yet even as people wept openly, there was an unspoken understanding among them. This was a unique, once-in-a-lifetime moment. There was no guidebook for how to grieve for a legend. No one knew exactly how to mourn the king. Memphis itself seemed to grieve. The city had always been closely tied to Elvis. After all, it was here that his story began, where the boy with the unassuming smile and the wild, untamable voice had changed the world. Now, as the funeral procession began, The streets of Memphis became a gathering place for thousands of people who felt an unexplainable connection to the man they had never met, but whose music had defined so much of their lives. The local radio stations played his songs one after another as if trying to keep the spirit of Elvis alive, to remind everyone that while he was gone from this world, his voice and his legacy would remain forever etched in time. As the funeral cortege slowly made its way through the city, the streets were lined with onlookers, many holding up signs that read, "Long live the King," "Elvis forever," and "We love you, Elvis." Some stood silently, heads bowed, while others wept in the arms of loved ones. The world outside Graceland had become a reflection of the raw emotional power Elvis held over the hearts of so many. It wasn't just about the man who had been a superstar, it was about the man who had been in many ways a friend, a confidant, and a beacon of hope for millions. At Graceland itself, the entire landscape seemed to have been transformed. The house, normally surrounded by a sense of privacy and exclusivity, was now open for the public to witness a private grief that could not be contained. The long driveways and manicured lawns that once led to Elvis's personal paradise were now lined with fans, many clutching roses and memorabilia as though trying to capture a piece of him, even in death. Every moment was imbued with a sense of surrealism, a reminder that the king's reign had truly come to an end. Inside the mansion, the funeral proceedings were about to begin, but before they did, a moment of quiet reflection hung in the air. No one wanted to let go of the Elvis they had known, the man who had come to symbolize the essence of rebellion, freedom, and joy. And yet, as the final arrangements were made, it was clear that this was a funeral, a goodbye, the end of a chapter that would never be rewritten. At Graceland, amidst the tears and the chaos, there was an undeniable truth. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had left an indelible mark on the world. And as the final funeral procession prepared to begin, there was a collective sense that the man, his music, and his spirit would live on forever in the hearts and minds of all those who had been touched by him. For all the public spectacle surrounding Elvis Presley's funeral, it was the raw and private grief of his family that truly underscored the tragedy of his untimely death. Beneath the veneer of fame and fortune was a family grappling with unimaginable loss, the kind of heartbreak that no amount of adoration or wealth could shield them from. At the heart of this sorrow was Vernon Presley, Elvis's father and lifelong confidant. Vernon had been there from the very beginning, witnessing Elvis's meteoric rise from a poor boy in Tupelo, Mississippi, to the king of rock and roll. Their relationship wasn't just one of father and son, it was a partnership, a bond forged through shared dreams and the trials of navigating Elvis's unparalleled fame. Vernon had been instrumental in managing Elvis's career and estate, ensuring that his son's empire remained strong. Now he was left with the devastating reality of outliving the boy he had raised. In the hours leading up to the funeral, Vernon's grief was palpable. Witnesses described him as a man utterly broken, his usually steady demeanor replaced by visible anguish. He was seen leaning against Elvis's casket, tears streaming down his face, whispering words that only he and his son would ever know. For Vernon, the loss was more than just the death of a child. It was the loss of a shared life's work, the loss of a son who had become his pride and joy. He later said that he felt as though he had lost his reason for living, and those close to him feared he might never recover from the heartbreak. Lisa Marie Presley, just 9 years old at the time, was another who bore the heavy burden of loss. The little girl who had been the light of Elvis's life was now left to grapple with the absence of her beloved father. Elvis adored Lisa Marie, often doting on her with lavish gifts and tender moments. To her, he wasn't just a global superstar. He was Daddy, a playful, loving figure who had always been her safe haven. Priscilla Presley, Elvis's ex-wife, later recalled that explaining his death to Lisa Marie was one of the hardest things she had ever done. How do you tell a child that her father, her hero, is gone forever? Priscilla herself was visibly shaken during the funeral. Though their marriage had ended years earlier, she and Elvis had remained close, co-parenting Lisa Marie and maintaining a deep bond built on mutual respect and love. Priscilla carried not only her own grief, but also the responsibility of helping her daughter navigate this unimaginable tragedy. Many of those in attendance noted how composed she remained during the funeral, quietly comforting Lisa Marie while internally grappling with her own heartbreak. The family's pain was shared by other close relatives and lifelong friends who had been part of Elvis's inner circle. His grandmother, Minnie Mae Presley, known affectionately as Dodger, was also present. Having already lost her husband and another grandson, the death of Elvis was an almost unbearable blow. Minnie Mae had been a steady presence in Elvis's life, often providing him with grounding and comfort amid the chaos of fame. Now, at 85 years old, she was saying goodbye to the grandson she had adored. Beyond immediate family, members of Elvis's close-knit entourage, known as the Memphis Mafia, were also visibly grieving. These were the men who had stood by Elvis through thick and thin, serving not only as employees but also as trusted friends and confidants. Their faces bore the weight of the loss, their silence speaking volumes about the depth of their sorrow. For them, Elvis wasn't just a boss or a superstar. He was family. The Presley family's grief was a poignant reminder that behind the glamour of celebrity lay real people experiencing real pain. While the world mourned the king of rock and roll, his family mourned a son, a father, a grandson, and a friend. Elvis Presley's funeral wasn't just a family affair, it was a gathering of icons, a reflection of the wide-reaching impact Elvis had on the world. From Hollywood stars to music legends, the attendees represented a cross-section of the entertainment industry, each person there to pay their respects to a man who had touched their lives in profound ways. Yet among the mourners were some truly surprising faces, adding an air of intrigue to an already extraordinary event. One of the most expected attendees was Anne Margaret, the Swedish-American actress and singer who had shared a close relationship with Elvis. Known for their electric chemistry both on and off screen, Anne Margaret had co-starred with Elvis in the 1964 film Viva Las Vegas. Their bond extended far beyond the cameras, and it was no secret that she had held a special place in Elvis's heart. When she arrived at Graceland, tears streaming down her face, her presence reminded everyone of the deep and personal connections Elvis had forged throughout his life. Anne Margaret's grief was raw and visible, a testament to the depth of their friendship. Another prominent figure was James Brown, the godfather of soul. James and Elvis had shared a mutual respect and admiration for each other's groundbreaking contributions to music. Their friendship had been forged on a foundation of shared struggles and triumphs as trailblazing black and white artists in a segregated America. Brown was visibly emotional during the funeral, reportedly calling Elvis his brother and expressing gratitude for the ways in which Elvis had helped bridge cultural divides through his music. Among the unexpected attendees was Caroline Kennedy, daughter of President John F. Kennedy. Her presence at the funeral highlighted the extent of Elvis's influence, even among political and cultural elites. Caroline had been just a young girl during her father's presidency, but she, like so many others, had grown up with Elvis's music as a backdrop to her life. Her attendance was a reminder of how Elvis's reach extended far beyond the music industry, touching people in the highest echelons of society. Another surprising figure was John Wayne, the legendary actor and icon of classic Hollywood. Known for his rugged on-screen persona, Wayne's presence at the funeral was unexpected but deeply significant. The two men had shared a quiet friendship, bonded by their shared status as larger-than-life American icons. John Wayne's stoic demeanor was a sharp contrast to the emotional atmosphere, but his attendance underscored the respect Elvis commanded across different realms of entertainment. Priscilla Presley later recounted the presence of other notable figures, including Marilyn Monroe's ex-husband Joe DiMaggio and music icons like Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis. The wide array of attendees reflected the diverse and far-reaching impact Elvis had made. He was more than a rock and roll star. He was a cultural phenomenon whose music and charisma had transcended boundaries. Even Elvis's fans, many of whom had traveled great distances, added to the mix of surprising and expected attendees. Thousands lined the streets outside Graceland, holding flowers, candles, and photographs of their idol. Some were dressed in Elvis-inspired clothing, while others carried signs expressing their undying love and admiration. It was a scene of both unity and individuality as fans from all walks of life came together to mourn the king. Perhaps the most touching aspect of the guest list was the inclusion of so many of Elvis's childhood friends and local acquaintances. People who had known him before the fame, who had seen the boy before he became a legend, came to say goodbye. Their presence was a reminder of Elvis's roots, grounding the larger-than-life figure in the reality of his humble beginnings. The mix of celebrities, family, lifelong friends, and adoring fans made Elvis's funeral a truly unique event. It wasn't just a gathering to mourn a superstar. It was a celebration of a man who had touched millions of lives in countless ways. The sheer diversity of attendees served as a testament to Elvis's universal appeal, ensuring that his final farewell was as grand and unforgettable as his life. While the public saw the grandeur and emotional weight of Elvis Presley's funeral, what happened behind the scenes offered an even deeper glimpse into the connections, loyalty, and intricate details that shaped the farewell to the king of rock and roll. Behind the heavy velvet curtains and ornate doors of Graceland, the preparations for Elvis's final goodbye were an emotional labor of love, involving not just his family, but also close friends and trusted associates. The days leading up to the funeral were marked by a flurry of activity. Vernon Presley, already crushed by the loss of his son, took on the daunting task of arranging the funeral. He was meticulous, wanting every detail to honor Elvis's memory. Vernon worked closely with the funeral directors, personally approving everything from the casket to the flower arrangements. Elvis's copper casket, lined with white satin, was chosen not only for its elegance but also for its ability to reflect the grandeur of a man who had lived so large. It was a choice that symbolized both Elvis's status as a cultural icon and his deep love for the finer things in life. The pallbearers included some of Elvis's closest friends, members of his famed Memphis Mafia. These men had been by Elvis's side through his greatest triumphs and his darkest moments, and they carried the weight of their loss, literally and emotionally, as they bore his casket. Each of them understood the honor of their role, and despite their grief, they remained composed, knowing they were fulfilling a final duty to their friend. It was said that they rehearsed the procession multiple times, ensuring that everything would go smoothly on the day. Graceland itself was transformed into a place of mourning. Every room was adorned with flowers sent from around the world, from elaborate floral tributes sent by celebrities and dignitaries to simple bouquets from ordinary fans. The sheer number of flowers was staggering, filling the air with a sweet, almost overpowering fragrance. Vernon insisted on keeping every card and message that accompanied these tributes, later saying that he wanted to preserve the memory of how deeply loved his son was. One of the most poignant behind-the-scenes moments occurred as family and friends gathered for a private viewing before the public was allowed in. Vernon reportedly spent hours by the casket saying his goodbyes. Those present described the scene as heart-wrenching, with Vernon breaking down multiple times. Priscilla Presley, though visibly shaken, remained strong for Lisa Marie, holding her daughter close and whispering reassurances as they said their goodbyes to Elvis. The staff at Graceland, many of whom had worked for Elvis for years, also played a key role behind the scenes. From preparing the mansion for the influx of mourners to coordinating the logistics of the funeral procession, they worked tirelessly to ensure that everything was perfect. For these staff members, Elvis wasn't just an employer, he was family, and their efforts reflected their deep respect and affection for him. The funeral procession itself required extensive coordination. The route was carefully planned to allow thousands of fans to catch a glimpse of the hearse carrying Elvis's casket. Police officers, local officials, and security teams worked around the clock to manage the massive crowds that had gathered in Memphis. Despite the somber occasion, there was a palpable energy among the fans, a mix of grief and gratitude for the life and legacy of the man they had come to honor. The days following Elvis Presley's funeral were marked by a profound and lingering sense of loss, not only for his family, but also for the millions of fans who had followed his journey. For Vernon Presley, the aftermath was especially devastating. Having outlived his beloved wife Gladys and now his son, Vernon found himself increasingly isolated. He was left to manage Elvis's estate, a task that proved both emotionally and logistically overwhelming. Vernon spent countless hours at Graceland, often sitting alone in Elvis's favorite rooms, surrounded by memories that were both comforting and painful. Lisa Marie Presley, just 9 years old at the time, struggled to understand the magnitude of what had happened. For her, the loss of her father was deeply personal, a void that no amount of fame or legacy could fill. Priscilla Presley later shared that helping Lisa Marie cope became her primary focus in the weeks following the funeral. Together, they leaned on each other, drawing strength from their shared memories of Elvis. Graceland itself became a symbol of Elvis's enduring legacy and the epicenter of his mourning. Thousands of fans continued to flock to the gates, leaving flowers, notes, and mementos in tribute. The Presley family eventually decided to open Graceland to the public, a decision that would transform the estate into a pilgrimage site for fans from around the world. The home that had once been Elvis's sanctuary was now a museum of sorts, preserving the life and legacy of the king. The music world also felt the aftershocks of Elvis's death. Radio stations played his songs on repeat and record sales skyrocketed as fans sought comfort in his music. Tributes poured in from fellow artists, many of whom credited Elvis with paving the way for their own careers. James Brown, still reeling from the loss of his friend, performed a heartfelt tribute at one of his concerts, dedicating a medley of songs to the king. For years after Elvis's passing, conspiracy theories and rumors swirled, fueled by fans who couldn't accept that their idol was truly gone. Stories of sightings and secret messages in his songs only added to the mythology surrounding his life and death. While these tales were often dismissed, they underscored the depth of the connection fans felt to Elvis, a connection so strong that many refused to believe he was no longer with them. Elvis Presley's death marked the end of an era, but his legacy has only grown stronger in the decades since. Known as the King of Rock and Roll, Elvis redefined popular music, blending genres and breaking barriers in a way that had never been done before. His influence can be heard in the music of countless artists who followed, from rock and roll legends like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin to pop icons like Michael Jackson. Beyond his music, Elvis's impact on culture was immeasurable. He represented a new kind of American dream, a poor boy from Tupelo who rose to become one of the most famous and beloved figures in the world. His hip-shaking performances and charismatic stage presence challenged societal norms, opening the door for greater freedom of expression in music and entertainment. Elvis's humanitarian efforts are another often overlooked aspect of his legacy. From his generous donations to charities and local organizations to his countless acts of kindness for fans and friends, Elvis used his fame to give back in meaningful ways. These stories, though less publicized, reveal a man who was deeply compassionate and aware of his ability to make a difference. Graceland, now a National Historic Landmark, stands as a testament to Elvis's enduring legacy. Millions of fans visit every year, walking the same halls he once called home and reflecting on the life of a man who changed the world. The estate serves not only as a museum but also as a gathering place for fans to celebrate Elvis's music, his life, and the joy he brought to so many. In the end, Elvis Presley's legacy is one of transformation and inspiration. He was more than a singer or an entertainer. He was a cultural phenomenon who brought people together through the universal language of music. As fans continue to discover his work and celebrate his contributions, the king lives on, proving that while his time on earth may have ended, his influence is truly timeless. So what really happened at Elvis's funeral? Behind the grand procession, the famous faces, and the outpouring of grief, there were moments of deep human loss, personal reflection, and even a few shocking surprises. But more than anything, it was a day that honored the life of a man who had forever changed the world. If this glimpse into the king's final farewell has left you all shook up, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and share your thoughts. What part of Elvis's legacy means the most to you? Let's keep the king's memory alive together.